10 years ago, my mother looked me in the eye and signed a paper disowning me as if I were a stain on this family. They embraced the golden child and tossed me out like garbage. But tonight, inside a luxury boardroom, I signed the one document that made them choke because I own everything now. What they do not realize is that my wealthy grandfather had been planning this exact moment for a long time. My name is Cassandra Hawthorne, and the elevator ride to the 45th floor of the Hawthorne Crest Tower took exactly 42 seconds. I counted every single one of them. It was a habit I had picked up a decade ago, a way to keep my heart rate steady when the world around me felt like it was collapsing. But today, my world was not collapsing. Today, I was the one pulling the pin on the grenade. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, expensive chime. The air up here smelled different. It smelled of filtered ozone, leather polish, and the kind of aggressive money that did not need to raise its voice to be heard. I stepped out onto the plush carpet, my heels sinking just enough to mute the sound of my approach. I was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than the car I drove for the first 5 years of my independent life. But to the people inside the glass-walled conference room at the end of the hall, I knew exactly what I looked like. I looked like an intruder. I looked like a ghost. To some of them, I probably looked like a stain they thought they had scrubbed out of the carpet years ago. The receptionist, a young woman who looked terrified of her own phone, started to stand up as I walked past her desk. She opened her mouth to ask for my credentials, but I did not break my stride. I kept my eyes locked on the double glass doors ahead. Inside, the board of Hawthorne Holdings was already in session. I could see the backs of the suits. I could see the expansive view of the city skyline, gray and weeping with rain, similar to the night I left. And at the head of the table, I saw her, Blair, my sister, the golden child. She was laughing at something the man to her right had said, her head thrown back, exposing the long, elegant line of her neck. She looked radiant. She looked like someone who had never known a single day of hunger or a single night of sleeping in a car because she was too afraid to sign a lease. She sat in the leather executive chair as if she had been born in it, which, according to our mother, she basically had. I pushed the glass doors open. The heavy latch clicked, a sharp sound that sliced through the low hum of conversation in the room. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. 12 heads turned in unison. The laughter died in Blair's throat. She blinked, her perfect mascara framing eyes that widened in genuine confusion. For a second, she did not even recognize me. I had my hair cut. I stood taller. I was not the slump-shouldered teenager she used to torment. But then, the recognition hit, and her expression shifted from confusion to an ugly, familiar sneer. "You are in the wrong place," Blair said. Her voice was light, dismissive, the way one speaks to a confused delivery driver who has wandered into a private party. She did not even stand up. She just waved a manicured hand toward the door. "Security is in the lobby. I think you missed the turn for the service entrance." The old men in the suits chuckled nervously, taking their cues from her. They thought this was a joke. They thought I was a mistake. I did not say a word. I did not look at the board members who were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. I walked straight to the head of the table, the heavy folder in my hand feeling like a weapon. It was thick, bound in black leather, and inside it lay the dissection of their entire reality. I stopped right next to Blair. The scent of her perfume, expensive floral, cloying and sweet, hit me. Triggering a wave of nausea I shoved down instantly. I looked down at her. She looked up, her smile faltering just a fraction as she realized I was not leaving. "Cassandra," she asked, the name tasting sour in her mouth. "What are you doing here? This is a closed meeting for shareholders and executive leadership. You are neither." "I am not here to catch up, Blair," I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. 10 years of screaming into my pillow had exhausted all the tremors out of me. I dropped the folder onto the polished mahogany table. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud that made the water in the crystal glasses tremble. "Read it," I said. The company lawyer, a man named Sterling who had been cleaning up my family's messes since before I was born, reached for the folder. His hand was steady at first. He adjusted his glasses, looking annoyed, likely planning the legal threats he was going to hurl at me to get me escorted out of the building. He flipped open the cover. I watched his eyes scan the first page. I watched the annoyance vanish. I watched the blood drain from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. "Mr. Sterling," Blair asked, her voice sharpening. "Tell her to leave. Tell her she is trespassing." Sterling did not speak. He flipped to the second page, then the third. His hands started to shake. He looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not annoying, fear. He looked from me to the document, then to the chairman of the board, a stoic man named Vance who was watching the exchange with narrowed eyes. "What is it?" Vance asked. Sterling cleared his throat. It sounded like rattling dry leaves. "It is a certificate of voting rights," Sterling whispered, his voice barely audible. "And a notarized addendum to the Hawthorne Family Trust." "So what?" Blair snapped. "Grandfather is senile. Whatever she tricked him into signing." "It is dated today," Sterling cut her off, his voice rising, cracking with panic. "And it is authenticated by the Federal Oversight Committee." He looked at Blair, then at the rest of the room. "According to the addendum of the Hawthorne Family Trust, the person with the final executive decision today is Cassandra Hawthorne." The room erupted. Men were shouting, demanding to see the papers. Blair stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the credenza with a crash. "That is a lie," she shrieked. The poise was gone. The golden child veneer cracked, revealing the spoiled brat underneath. "She is disowned. Mother cut her out 10 years ago. She is nobody." "The trust supersedes the family status," Sterling said, looking like he might vomit. "The shares were not your mother's to give. Blair, they belong to Gideon. And Gideon has transferred his proxy to her." Blair pointed a shaking finger at me. "To the rat we threw out." I stood perfectly still. I did not smile. Smiling would imply this was a game. This was not a game. This was an execution. Then, the doors opened again. I did not have to turn around to know who it was. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The sound of heels clicking on the floor was different this time, sharper, faster, angry. "What is taking so long?" The voice was distinctive, raspy from years of social smoking and shouting at servants. "Blair, honey, have you signed the merger yet? We have the gala at 6. Denise Hawthorne, my mother. She swept into the room wrapped in a white coat that probably cost more than my college tuition. She stopped when she saw the chaos. She stopped when she saw Blair standing with her back to the wall, pale and trembling. And then she saw me. Her face did not register shock. It registered pure, unadulterated hatred. It was a look I knew well. It was the look she gave me when I got an A- instead of an A. It was the look she gave me when I wore a dress she did not like. It was the look she gave me the night she told me I was dead to her. She marched over to where I stood, ignoring the lawyers, ignoring the board members. She walked right up to me, invading my personal space, her eyes scanning my face for any sign of weakness. "I told security to keep the trash out," Denise hissed. "Who let you in?" "I let myself in," I said. "You have no business here." She spat. She reached out, gripping Blair's arm as if to protect her, pulling the golden child behind her. "Did you run out of money? Is that it? Did you come crawling back to beg for scraps I told you 10 years ago? Cassandra, you get nothing. You are nothing." She looked around the room, trying to rally support, trying to play the matriarch. She let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "Look at her," she said to the board, gesturing at me. "Dressed up like she belongs. It is pathetic. I was right to disown you." The words hung in the air. I was right to disown you. For a moment, the boardroom faded. I was back in Briarhaven, Missouri. I was 17 years old. The hallway of our house smelled of lavender and old secrets. Denise was standing at the top of the stairs, holding the envelope, the scholarship letter I had worked 2 jobs to earn, the one she had ripped into pieces. "You are selfish," She had screamed then. Blair needs this money for her debut. You can work. You are built for work. Blair is built for greatness. I remembered the sound of the rain hitting the roof. I remembered the way my hands shook as I packed the single, battered suitcase I had bought from a thrift store. I remembered walking out the front door, the water soaking through my thin hoodie instantly. I remembered turning back, just once, hoping someone would come after me, hoping my father would stand up from his chair, hoping Blair would say it wasn't fair. But the only thing I got was the sight of Denise standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the warm golden light of the hallway. She did not look sad. She looked relieved. "Don't come back," she yelled over the thunder. "You are not my daughter anymore." And then, the sound, the heavy wooden slam of the front door, the click of the deadbolt sliding home. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a life ending. I stood there in the mud, clutching the broken handle of my suitcase, realizing that the people who were supposed to love me had just thrown me away like a bag of kitchen refuse. I blinked, and the memory receded, leaving me cold and sharp in the climate-controlled air of the tower. Denise was still smirking, waiting for me to cry, waiting for me to break. She expected the 17-year-old girl who begged for a reason. She did not know the woman who had spent the last decade building armor out of scar tissue. I looked at her. I looked at the lines around her eyes that surgery couldn't quite hide. I looked at the fear vibrating off Blair. "I am not here to argue, Mother," I said softly. "Then get out," Denise snapped. "No," I said. I placed my hand flat on the certificate of voting rights. "I am not here to beg, and I'm certainly not here to be your daughter." I leaned in closer, so only she and Blair could hear the steel in my voice. "I am here to finish your business." The color drained from Denise's face as the implication of the document on the table finally seemed to penetrate her arrogance. She looked at the lawyer. Sterling gave a tiny, defeated nod. The power in the room shifted. It was palpable, like a change in air pressure before a storm. The board members were no longer looking at Blair. They were looking at me. They were realizing that the ground had shifted under their feet, and they were standing on the wrong side of the fault line. I turned away from my mother and sister, facing the wall of glass that overlooked the city. I saw my reflection in the dark pane. I looked calm. I looked professional. But inside, there was a fire that had been burning for 3,650 days. They thought they had buried me. They thought that by cutting off the money, the name, and the love, they could erase me. They thought that giving Blair everything and giving me nothing would ensure their legacy. But they forgot one thing. When you throw a child to the wolves, you better hope she does not come back leading the pack. I looked straight at my reflection, and through it, I looked at you. Yes, you. If you have ever been the one who was asked to sacrifice your happiness to keep the peace, if you have ever been the invisible child, the scapegoat, the one who had to be strong so everyone else could be weak, if you have ever been the sacrificial lamb placed on the altar of a narcissist's ego, then you will understand what is about to happen. You will understand why. Starting tonight, they are going to lose everything. To understand why I stood in that boardroom with a heart made of ice, you have to understand the house in Briarhaven, Missouri. From the street, the Hawthorne residence was a monument to old-world stability. It had white pillars, manicured boxwood hedges that were trimmed to within an inch of their lives, and a driveway paved with imported stone. To the neighbors, we were the local royalty, the descendants of the great Gideon Hawthorne, living off the dividends of an empire. But inside, the house was rotting. The rot was not in the wood or the drywall. It was in silence at the dinner table. It was in the way my mother, Denise, looked at her two daughters and saw two completely different species. Blair was the show pony. She was 2 years older than me, with hair that always seemed to catch the light, and a laugh that she had practiced in front of a mirror until it sounded like wind chimes. Blair was the investment. Denise poured everything into her pageant fees. Tennis lessons, clothes that cost more than a used car. Blair knew her role perfectly. She knew how to tilt her head when Denise spoke. how to offer compliments that fed our mother's bottomless need for validation, and how to act helpless so Denise could feel useful. I was the draft horse. I was the one who fixed the Wi-Fi router. I was the one who balanced the household checkbook when Denise could not deal with the math right now. I was the one who worked. By the time I was 17, I had 3 streams of income. I tutored algebra to failing middle schoolers. I restocked shelves at the local pharmacy on weekends. And I ghost-wrote essays for rich kids at the private school across town. I did not work because I wanted new clothes. I worked because I was building an escape hatch. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account that I thought was private. It was my freedom fund. I had calculated exactly how much I needed to get to the state university, pay for a dorm room, and buy a meal plan. I had a scholarship lined up, a partial academic grant that covered tuition, but I needed the cash for everything else. I had $3,480 saved. It was not a fortune, but to me, it was oxygen. The explosion happened on a Tuesday. I remember it was a Tuesday because that was the day the pharmacy deposited my paycheck. I logged into my banking app on my phone during my lunch break at school, just to see the number go up. It was a ritual I had. It calmed me down. I opened the app. The balance read $12.50. I stared at the screen. I refreshed it. I thought maybe the app was glitching. I refreshed it again. $12. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. I scrolled through the transaction history. There was a single withdrawal made yesterday afternoon. It was a counter withdrawal, meaning someone had walked into the bank with a slip and taken the cash. I cut my last class. I drove my beat-up sedan home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I walked into the house, the air smelled of lavender and pot roast. It was sickeningly normal. Denise was in the living room, flipping through a magazine. Blair was sitting on the floor, surrounded by shopping bags from the most expensive boutique in the city. Blair looked up, her eyes bright. She held up a dress. It was emerald green silk, strapless, and beautiful. "Look, Cassie," she said. "Mom got it for me for the Founders Gala. Isn't it perfect?" I looked at the dress, then I looked at Denise. "You took my money," I said. It was not a question. Denise did not even look up from her magazine. She turned a page, the paper making a sharp crinkling sound. "Do not be dramatic, Cassandra. I moved some funds around." "You emptied my account," I said, my voice rising. "That was my money. I earned it. I scrubbed shelves and taught algebra for that money." "And you live under my roof," Denise said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were cold, flat, unbothered. "You eat my food. You use my electricity. Consider it a contribution to the household." "You did not use it for electricity," I said, pointing at the sea of shopping bags around Blair. "You used it to buy her a dress." "Blair is representing this family on Saturday," Denise said, her voice hardening. "She needs to look the part. You know how important appearances are. Or are you too selfish to care about anyone but yourself?" "Selfish." I laughed, but it was a dry, broken sound. "I am the one working. Blair is 19 years old, and she has never held a job in her life." "Blair has a different path," Denise snapped. She stood up, closing the magazine with a slap. "She is delicate. She is not built for manual labor like you are. You should be happy to help your sister shine. Why are you always so jealous of her?" "This is theft," I said. "I am going to the bank. I am going to report it as fraud." The room went deadly silent. Blair stopped smiling. She lowered the green dress. Denise looked at me, and for a second, I saw genuine danger in her eyes. "You will do no such thing," Denise whispered. "Watch me," I said. I turned to leave, but Denise was faster. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. She did not hit me. She never hit me. That would leave marks, and marks were evidence. Instead, she leaned in close, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and performance. "If you walk out that door and embarrass this family," she hissed, "you will wish you were never born." "I already wish that," I said. I pulled my arm free and went to my room. I intended to pack right then. But Denise was not done. She was a master of the narrative, and she knew she was losing control of me. She needed to break me before I could leave. 2 hours later, I was summoned downstairs. When I walked into the living room, it had been transformed into a tribunal. Denise sat in the high-backed armchair. Blair sat next to her, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, and sitting on the sofa was Aunt Ruth, Denise's older sister, who had driven over from the next town. "Sit down, Cassandra," Denise said. "I am leaving," I said. "Sit down," Denise shouted. It was the first time she had raised her voice that night. I sat on the edge of the ottoman. I looked at Aunt Ruth. Ruth looked uncomfortable. She avoided my eyes. "Cassandra," Ruth said softly, "your mother tells me you are having an episode." "I am not having an episode," I said calmly. "She stole $3,000 from me." "It was family money," Denise interjected smoothly. "I simply consolidated our accounts to cover emergency expenses, and now she is threatening to call the police on her own mother. Tell her, Ruth, tell her how sick that is." "Cassandra," Ruth said, "you can't call the police on your family. It just isn't done." "So she can rob me?" I asked. "Oh, stop lying," Blair suddenly wailed. She stood up, the picture of tragic victimhood. "You have always hated me. You are just mad because Mom bought me a nice dress and you are jealous. You are so greedy. Cassie, you hoard your money like a dragon while we are struggling to keep this house running." It was such a twisted inversion of reality that I could not even speak. I looked at them. I looked at the three of them. Denise, the puppet master, Blair, the puppet, and Ruth, the audience who refused to look behind the curtain. "I am done," I said. I stood up. "If you walk out," Denise said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register, "you do not come back." "Okay," I said. "I mean it. Cassandra," Denise said. She reached onto the side table and picked up a piece of paper. It was handwritten. I could see her sharp, angular script from where I stood. "If you are so desperate to be independent, then prove it. Sign this." She held the paper out. I took it. It was a voluntary relinquishment of family privileges. It was nonsense. It was not a legal document. It was a piece of theater. It listed things like access to the Hawthorne residence, financial support, and association with the family name. "Sign it," Denise said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "If you think you are better than us, if you think you do not need us, sign it and get out. But know this, once you sign that, you are dead to us. No Christmas, no birthdays, no help when you fail, and you will fail." She expected me to crumble. She expected me to cry, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness so I could stay in my warm bed. She thought the fear of the world outside was greater than the pain inside this house. She was wrong. I looked at the paper, then I looked at her. "Do you have a pen?" I asked. The smile vanished from Denise's face. Blair stopped her fake crying and stared. Denise handed me a pen, her hand shaking slightly. I placed the paper on the coffee table. I did not hesitate. I signed my name, Cassandra Hawthorne. The letters were dark and firm. I put the pen down. "There," I said. "Are you happy?" "Get out," Denise whispered. She looked shocked. She had played her ace card, and I had trumped it. "Get your things and get out of my house. Tonight." Gladly, I went upstairs. I did not cry. I felt a strange, vibrating numbness, like my entire body had fallen asleep. I took my suitcase, the one I had bought from the thrift store months ago, because I knew this day would come, and I packed. I packed my uniforms. I packed my textbooks. I packed the one photo I had of my father before he died. I left the clothes Denise had bought me. I left the jewelry. I left everything that felt like a chain. It took me 20 minutes. When I came back downstairs, they were still in the living room. They did not look at me. It was as if I had already become a ghost. I walked to the front door. My hand touched the cold brass knob. "You will be back," Denise called out from the living room. She did not turn around. "You will be back in a week, begging on your knees, and I will close the door in your face." I opened the door. It was raining. A cold, miserable Missouri rain that soaked the world in gray. "I will live without you," I said. It was not a scream. It was a statement of fact. I stepped out and closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the most final thing I had ever heard. I walked to my car. It wouldn't start at first. The engine sputtered, coughing in the damp air. I pleaded with it silently. "Please, just this once." It roared to life on the third try. I backed out of the driveway, past the white pillars, past the boxwood hedges, and I did not look back. I drove 4 miles to the other side of town, to a neighborhood where the houses were smaller and the lawns were less manicured, but the windows glowed with a warmer light. I pulled into the driveway of the Ward residence. Tessa Ward was my only real friend. Her parents were normal. They argued about whose turn it was to do the dishes, not about how to destroy each other psychologically. I had called Tessa from the car. She was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. When I got out of the car, I was soaked instantly. Tessa ran down the steps and hugged me. She did not ask questions. She just grabbed my suitcase and pulled me inside. Her house smelled of cinnamon and laundry detergent. Her mother, Mrs. Ward, was in the kitchen making tea. She took one look at me wet, shivering, holding my life in a plastic handle, and she set a mug on the table. "Sit," Mrs. Ward said. "You are safe here, Cassie." I sat, and that was when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, thinking it was Denise sending one last hateful message. But the number was unknown. It was an area code I did not recognize, something from the East Coast. I opened the message. "Do not sign anything else. Someone is watching your file." I stared at the screen. The chill that ran down my spine had nothing to do with the rain. I looked at the time. It was 11 at night. Who knew I had just signed something? Who knew I had just left Cassie? Tessa asked, touching my shoulder. "Is everything okay?" I turned off the screen and shoved the phone deep into my pocket. "I do not know," I said, and for the first time that night, my voice shook. "I really do not know." The first thing I learned about freedom was that it was expensive. The second thing I learned was that it smelled like industrial floor cleaner and stale coffee. For the first few years after I walked out of my mother's house in the rain, my life was a series of calculations. Every decision was a math problem. If I bought the textbook for my managerial accounting class, I could not afford to put gas in the car for 3 days. If I picked up an extra shift at North Pine Service Center, I would miss the study group for my business law exam. I lived in a constant state of trade-offs, balancing exhaustion against survival. I moved out of Tessa's house after 3 months. I loved the Wards, but I needed to know that I could stand on my own 2 feet without wobbling. I rented a studio apartment above a bakery in a part of town where the streetlights flickered and the police sirens were a nightly lullaby. It was small. The radiator clanked like a dying engine, and the window looked out onto a brick wall. But the lease had my name on it. Just my name. I worked the graveyard shift at North Pine. It was a massive document processing facility that handled payroll and back-end logistics for mid-sized companies, from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. I was a machine. I keyed in data, verified invoices, and cross-referenced shipping manifests. My hands moved across the keyboard so fast that the clicking sounded like rain. By day, I was a ghost haunting the back row of the community college lecture halls. I drank so much caffeine that my hands had a permanent tremor, but I did not miss a single class. I devoured information. I learned about tax codes, liability structures, and employment law. I treated every lecture like it was a weapon I was forging for a war I had not yet fought. This was also when I learned to kill the part of me that wanted to apologize. In the beginning, when my landlord tried to raise my rent 3 months into a 12-month lease, the old Cassandra would have apologized for being an inconvenience and found a way to pay. The new Cassandra pulled out a highlighted copy of the State Tenant Rights Handbook and slid it across the counter. He never asked for the increase again. I changed my phone number the day I moved into the studio. I opened a new bank account at a credit union across the state line, just to be safe. I locked down my social media. I became a fortress. I told myself I was doing this to move on, but deep down, I knew I was doing it because I was terrified. I was terrified that one day I would wake up and find Denise standing over my bed, telling me the ride was over. But the person who truly taught me how to survive was Marion Klein. Marion was the floor manager at North Pine. She was a woman in her late 50s with hair the color of steel wool and a voice that sounded like gravel in a blender. She did not smile. She did not ask about your weekend. She cared about two things: accuracy and speed. One night, about a year into my employment, she stopped at my cubicle. I froze. Usually, when Marion stopped, it meant you were fired. She tapped a long, red fingernail on my monitor. "You flagged this invoice," she said. "Yes, ma'am," I said, sitting up straighter. The vendor ID did not match the purchase order origin. It looked like a duplicate billing from a shell vendor. Marion looked at me over the rim of her reading glasses. She did not praise me. She just pulled up a chair and sat down. "Most people here just hit approval because they want to go out for a smoke break," she said. "You actually read the contracts." "I like to know what I'm signing off on," I said. "Good," Marion said. "Because the fine print is where they get you. Rich people do not get rich by working hard. Hawthorne, they get rich by writing contracts that poor people do not understand. If you want to survive in this world, you learn to read the things people try to hide in the margins." From that night on, Marion took me under her wing. It was not a warm, fuzzy mentorship. There were no hugs. Instead, she taught me how to analyze a profit and loss statement until I could see the story behind the numbers. She taught me how to spot ghost employees on a payroll. She taught me the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion, and how corporate structures could be used to bury liability. Always follow the money. Marion told me one night as we shared a lukewarm pizza in the break room, "People lie. Ideally, spouses lie, parents lie, but the ledger never lies. If you know how to read it, the money will tell you exactly who someone is." I took that advice to heart. 3 years passed. I finished my associate degree and transferred to the State University online program while working full-time. I was exhausted, but I was climbing. I was promoted to a senior analyst role at North Pine. I was making enough money to buy vegetables that were not frozen and to put 20% of my paycheck into an index fund. Then came the file. It was a Tuesday night. Much like the night I left home, the digital queue dropped a new batch of accounts onto my dashboard. I opened the first one. It was a forensic audit request for a logistics firm called Arrowhead Distribution. I started scrolling through the general ledger. It seemed standard at first: fuel costs, vehicle maintenance, warehouse leasing. But then I saw the parent company code at the bottom of the legal entity structure: HH Global Sub 4. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew that code. I had seen it on my father's paperwork years ago. It was an internal designation for Hawthorne Holdings. I should have closed the file. I should have flagged it for conflict of interest and sent it to another analyst. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I knew that if I touched this, I was opening a door I had welded shut. But Marion's voice was in my head. The ledger never lies. I started digging. I spent 6 hours combing through Arrowhead Distribution's accounts. To an untrained eye, it looked like a struggling logistics company. To me, it looked like a siphon. There were monthly consulting fees being paid to a company registered in the Cayman Islands. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. The amounts were irregular, designed to look like operational costs, but they never matched any specific project. The expense codes were vague. Administrative support. Market research. I cross-referenced the dates of the payouts. They coincided with dates I knew from memory. A $10,000 payout on the 2nd of May, Blair's birthday. A $15,000 payout in mid-July, the week Denise always took her wellness retreat to the vineyards in Napa. They were using a subsidiary company to drain cash from the main holding, likely to bypass the oversight of the main board of directors or the trust executors. It was embezzlement, plain and simple. They were stealing from the company my grandfather built to fund their lifestyle. I felt a cold rage building in my chest. I had been eating ramen noodles and working double shifts to pay for my textbooks. while they were skimming thousands of dollars to pay for spa treatments and designer handbags. I did not report it. Not yet. Reporting it now would just alert them. I needed more. I needed a pattern. I opened a new spreadsheet on my personal drive. Password protected, encrypted. I copied the transaction IDs. I noted the dates. I started building a timeline. If they were sloppy enough to do this with one subsidiary, they were doing it with others. By the time my shift ended at 6 in the morning, my eyes were burning, but my mind was crystal clear. I drove home in the dawn light, feeling a strange sense of purpose. For years, I had been the victim. Now, I was the witness. When I got to my apartment, I was too wired to sleep. I made a pot of coffee and sat down at my personal laptop. The discovery of the Hawthorne fraud had triggered a paranoid itch in my brain. If they were playing fast and loose with the company money, what else were they doing? I decided to do something I had not done in 2 years. I logged into the Federal Credit Reporting Bureau to check my own financial standing. I prided myself on my credit score. It was 750. I paid every bill on time. I carried zero balance on my credit card. My financial hygiene was impeccable because it had to be. The pages loaded. I stared at the number, 580. I blinked. That was impossible. I hit refresh. The number stayed the same. A big, red, ugly, 580. My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled down to the open account section. There, sitting under my student loans and my single secured credit card, were 3 accounts I did not recognize. A luxury store credit card opened 18 months ago. Balance $4,000. A personal loan from a rapid cash lender opened 12 months ago. Balance $8,000. A utility account for a luxury apartment complex in the city. Past due. I clicked on the details. The billing address for the credit card was not my apartment. It was a post office box in a town 10 miles from Briarhaven. The recovery email address for the account was partially obscured, but I recognized the domain. It was the same private email server Denise used for her charity work. I felt the room spin. They had used my social security number. I had left. I had walked away. I had asked for nothing. I had signed their paper relinquishing my rights to their money, but they had kept my identity. They had kept me in their pocket like a spare credit card to be used when they maxed out their own. The dates lined up perfectly with periods where I knew Blair had been struggling with her failed business ventures. Denise had not just bailed her out. She had bailed her out using my future as collateral. I looked at the debts, $12,000 plus interest. To them, it was pocket change. To me, it was a death sentence. It would take me 5 years to pay that off. It would ruin my chances of getting a mortgage, a car loan, or even a better job. I sat there in my small, cold apartment, watching the cursor blink on the screen. I did not scream. I did not throw the laptop. The anger that had been simmering since the night in the rain suddenly cooled into something solid and hard, like tempered steel. They had broken the one rule that allowed us to coexist on this planet. They had not let me go. I reached for my phone. I did not call Denise. I did not call Blair. I called the number for the credit bureau to place an immediate fraud alert. Then, I looked at the screen one last time. My voice barely a whisper in the empty room. "They are still using my name," I said to the silence. "Even after they said I was no longer family, they are still feeding on me." I closed the laptop. "Fine," I said. "If you want to use my name, I will make sure it is the last name you ever see." I sat in front of my laptop, my fingers hovering over the trackpad like I was defusing a bomb. The screen cast a blue, sterile light over my small studio apartment. I was not crying. I was not screaming. I was operating in cold, hard survival mode. Step 1 was containment. I logged into the websites of the 3 major credit bureaus. One by one, I initiated a total security freeze. It was a digital tourniquet. I locked down my social security number so tight that not even I could apply for a library card without a 10-step verification process. I watched the confirmation screens pop up, green check marks signaling that the bleeding had, at least temporarily, stopped. But stopping the bleeding was not enough. I had to examine the wound. I paid the fee to download my full, unredacted credit report. It was 40 pages long. I printed it out. The printer hummed and spat out sheet after sheet of betrayal. I took a red marker and sat on the floor, spreading the papers out in a semicircle. I started circling everything that I did not recognize. The list was nauseating. There was a credit card opened with a luxury department store 3 years ago. The limit was $5,000. It was maxed out. I looked at the transaction history. A handbag for $2,000, a pair of heels for $800, a personal styling consultation for $500. I checked the dates. The handbag was purchased on October 14th, 2 years ago. I opened my old digital calendar on my phone. On October 14th, 2 years ago, I was studying for my intermediate accounting midterm. I had spent 8 hours in the university library. I had bought a vending machine sandwich for dinner because I could not afford the cafeteria food. While I was eating stale crackers and memorizing tax codes, my mother or my sister, because it had to be one of them, was walking out of a store with a bag worth more than my car, charging it to my future. I kept reading. There was a utility bill for a penthouse apartment in the trendy River District. The account holder was Cassandra Hawthorne, but the service address was a place I had never set foot in. I recognized the building, though. Blair had posted photos from a friend's apartment there on social media last year. She had thrown a champagne party. They had used my name to keep the lights on for their parties. I grabbed my phone and called Tessa. "I need you," I said when she answered. "Bring coffee, and bring your laptop." Tessa arrived 20 minutes later, looking like she was ready for a fight. She took one look at the sea of papers on my floor, and her expression hardened. "Is it bad?" she asked. "It is worse than bad," I said. "It is criminal. They have opened 5 accounts in my name over the last 4 years. Total debt is nearing $25,000. Tessa let out a low whistle. 25 grand, Cassie. That is a down payment on a house." "It is grand larceny," I corrected her. "Sit down. We need to build a timeline." For the next 6 hours, we built what I called the war file. We created a spreadsheet with 3 columns: the charge, the date, and the alibi. This was where my obsession with documentation paid off. Because I had been working hourly jobs and punching time clocks for years, I had a digital paper trail of my entire existence. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a charge for a spa weekend in Napa Valley. Charge date June 12th, amount $3,000. I pulled up my pay stubs from North Pine. On June 12th, I clocked in at 9 at night and clocked out at 7 in the morning. I said, "I worked a double shift because we were short-staffed. Unless I can teleport from a factory floor in Missouri to a mud bath in California." I did not make this charge. Tessa was typing furiously. "Got it. What about this one? An electronics store. $2,000 for a home theater system." I checked my student portal. I was in a proctored exam for business law. I have the attendance record. We went through every single line item. It was tedious, infuriating work. Every match was a fresh slap in the face. I saw charges for things I had denied myself for years: nice makeup, tailored clothes, exotic foods. They were living the life of a wealthy heiress using the credit of a struggling student. But the most damning piece of evidence was the address history. Hidden in the personal information section of the credit report was a list of addresses associated with the debts. One of them was a P.O. box in a town called Fairview. "Fairview," Tessa muttered. "Why does that sound familiar?" "Because my mother owns a rental property there," I said, my voice cold. "She bought a small commercial space years ago to run a boutique that never opened. It is just a shell." I logged into the county property records. The owner of the building at the address listed on my credit report was Denise Hawthorne. "Here is the link," I said. "They used my social security number, but they sent the bills to a property my mother owns so I would never see them." The next morning, I took a half day off work, something I never did, and went to the Civic Shield Legal Clinic. It was a cramped office in a strip mall, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop. The waiting room smelled of dust and anxiety. I waited for 45 minutes before a man called my name. He introduced himself as Mr. Vance. He looked tired. His tie was loose, and his desk was buried under mountains of case files. I sat down and placed my binder on the desk. "I think I am a victim of identity theft," I said. "Mr. Vance sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Okay, let us see what you have." He opened the binder. He expected a mess. What he got was a forensic audit. I had tabbed every section. I had highlighted the discrepancies. I had attached the alibis. He flipped through the pages, his eyebrows rising higher with every turn. After 5 minutes, he closed the binder and looked at me with a new level of respect. "You did not need a lawyer," he said. "You needed a badge. This is impeccable." "So, what do I do?" I asked. "Technically, Mr. Vance leaned back in his chair. "You have a slam-dunk case for disputing these debts. You have proof you did not incur them. You have proof the bills were sent to an address you do not own." "But," I asked, sensing the hesitation, "but to dispute these properly, to get the creditors to actually drop the debt and clean your report, you have to file a police report for identity theft," he said. He looked me in the eye. "And since you have identified the likely perpetrators as your mother and sister, that means you have to file a criminal complaint against your family." I went silent. "If you do not file the report," Mr. Vance continued, his voice gentle but firm, "the creditors will argue that this is a familial dispute or that you authorize the use of the cards. They will not clear the debt. You will be on the hook for $25,000. Your credit score will be ruined for 7 to 10 years. You will not be able to rent a decent apartment, buy a car, or even get certain jobs." 7 years, I whispered. "Or you file the report," he said. "The police investigate. Your mother faces felony fraud charges, but your name gets cleared." I looked at the binder. I thought about the night in the rain. I thought about the $12 in my bank account. I thought about Denise's voice saying, "You will be back on your knees. If I paid this debt, I would be kneeling. If I paid this debt, I was accepting that I existed only to be their resource." "I need to think about it," I said. "Do not take too long." "Mr. Vance said, the longer you wait, the harder it is to prove you did not authorize it." I took the binder and walked out. I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the dashboard. My hands were shaking. Sending my mother to prison, that was a line I had never thought I would have to cross. I opened the binder again, looking for something, anything, that would give me an alternative. I flipped to the back, to a section I had glossed over the night before. It was a photocopy of a supporting document from the Rapid Cash loan application. The lender had required proof of collateral or future assets to approve such a high-risk loan for a young person. The document was titled, "Authorization of Beneficiary Access, Hawthorne Family Trust." My breath hitched. I had never seen this document before. I pulled it out of the plastic sleeve and held it up to the light. It was a standard legal form, stating that Cassandra Hawthorne, as a beneficiary of the trust, was authorizing the release of future disbursement rights to serve as collateral for the loan. But it was not my signature at the bottom. It was a forgery, and a bad one. But that was not what made my blood run cold. There was a second signature line on the document. Co-signer, trustee approval. The signature there was Gideon Hawthorne. I stared at it. I knew my grandfather's signature. He used to send me birthday cards when I was very small. Before Denise stopped letting him see me, he had a very specific way of signing his G. It was sharp, architectural, like a blueprint. This signature was shaky. The ink was uneven, like someone had paused in the middle of the letters. It looked forced or traced. I remembered something Tessa had told me once about elder financial abuse, about how caretakers would guide the hand of a confused senior citizen to sign checks. My heart started to pound in my ears, louder than the traffic outside. This was not just about $25,000 of shoes and handbags. To get this loan, they had to prove I had access to the family trust. But I had been disowned. I should not have had access, unless they were lying to Gideon too. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They were using my identity, the identity of the granddaughter they had kicked out, to convince Gideon to sign off on releasing funds. They were telling him I needed money. They were probably telling him I was in trouble, or that I was sick, or that I was begging for help. And Gideon, my grandfather, who I thought had abandoned me, was signing. He was signing because he thought he was helping me. I looked at the date on the document. 6 months ago. Denise and Blair were not just stealing from me. They were using my name as a ghost to haunt my grandfather and drain his estate. They were double-dipping. They took the loan money for themselves, and they used the debt to guilt Gideon into releasing trust funds to save me. I closed the binder. The shaking in my hands stopped. The moral dilemma evaporated. This was no longer about protecting my mother. This was about protecting the only person in that family who might have actually loved me. I started the car. I was not going home. I was going back to Mr. Vance. "I am ready," I said to the empty car. "I am going to file the report, and then I am going to find out what they did to my grandfather." I pulled out of the parking lot, my tires screeching slightly on the asphalt. The victim was gone. The accountant was gone. The only thing left was the prosecutor. The war did not begin with a scream. It began with the soft, rhythmic clicking of a mouse. For the next 72 hours after leaving the legal clinic, I did not sleep. I dismantled my life, or rather, the life they had built on top of my shoulders brick by brick. I contacted the utility companies servicing the luxury apartment in the River District. I contacted the high-end cable provider. I contacted the concierge service. To each of them, I sent a notarized affidavit of identity theft and a directive to remove my name from the accounts immediately. I did not ask them to shut the services off. I simply told them, "I am not the customer. This is not my debt. I am revoking authorization for this billing entity effective immediately." The banks were harder, but Mr. Vance's police report worked like a battering ram. I watched as the accounts were frozen, one by one. The credit cards that Denise and Blair carried in their designer wallets were turned into useless pieces of plastic. I changed my own bank account numbers again. I set up two-factor authentication that required a code from a physical dongle I carried on my keychain. I became a digital fortress. Then, I waited. It took exactly 28 days for reality to hit them. That is the billing cycle. I was at work at North Pine, sitting in my cubicle, when my personal phone began to vibrate. It buzzed once, then twice, then continuously. It was doing a death rattle against the desk surface. I looked at the screen. "Mother?" I did not answer. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Then a text message popped up. "Pick up the phone." Then another. "The power is off." "What did you do?" I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee. I felt a strange sense of calm. A detached curiosity, like a scientist watching a reaction in a petri dish. I waited until my lunch break to call her back. I walked out to the parking lot, sat in my car, and dialed the number. She answered on the first ring. "You little wretch," Denise screamed. Her voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "What did you do? I have guests coming over in an hour. The lights are out. The internet is down. The security gate won't open." "Hello, Mother?" I said. My voice was level, devoid of the tremor that used to be there when I was 17. "Fix it," she shrieked. I called the power company and they said the account holder terminated responsibility. "That is you. You turned off my power." "I did not turn off your power," I said calmly. "I simply removed my name from a bill that isn't mine. If you want electricity, I suggest you open an account in your own name. Or perhaps ask Blair to do it." "How dare you?" She was hyperventilating now. "After everything I have done for you, after I let you back into our lives." "You didn't let me back in," I said. "You stole my identity to finance a penthouse I have never visited." "I needed that apartment for business meetings," she yelled. "It is for the family legacy. I'm trying to build something for you girls." "No," I corrected her. "You are building it for Blair, and you are building it with my credit score. I raised you." Denise played her favorite card. the one she kept in her back pocket for emergencies. Her voice dropped to a trembling, tragic register. I carried you for 9 months. I fed you. I clothed you. I sacrificed my youth to make sure you had a home. And this is how you repay me. By humiliating me. You owe me, Cassandra. You owe me your life. I looked out the windshield at the gray industrial park. A seagull was picking at a discarded wrapper near the dumpster. I do not owe you for existing, I said. Excuse me. Raising a child is not a loan with interest, Mother, I said. The words tasted like cold iron. You do not get to foreclose on a human being just because you birthed them. You did the bare minimum required by law. And the moment I became an asset you could liquidate, you sold me out. That is not parenting. That is trafficking. There was silence on the other end. A stunned, suffocating silence. Denise was not used to resistance. She was used to tears. She was used to me begging for her approval. You think you are so smart, she whispered finally. The tragedy was gone, replaced by venom. You think you can play games with me, I will ruin you. I will tell everyone. I will go to church. I will go to the ladies' auxiliary. I will tell them you are a drug addict. I will tell them you stole from us and cut off your sick mother's electricity out of spite. I will destroy your reputation in this town. She meant it. Denise's power lay in her ability to control the narrative. She was the master of the Whisper Network. Go ahead, I said. I will do it, she threatened. No, I said. You won't, because we are going to have a meeting. I am not meeting with you unless you turn the power back on. We are meeting, I said, ignoring her demand. Sunday, at Aunt Ruth's house, high noon. You bring Blair. I will bring my paperwork. If you want to tell stories about me, let us do it in front of the family. Ruth is on my side, Denise scoffed. Then you have nothing to worry about, I said. Be there, or I go to the police with the second half of the file. I hung up before she could respond. My heart was beating a little faster, but my hands were steady. I was not playing defense anymore. I was setting the board. Sunday arrived with a sky the color of a bruise. I drove to Aunt Ruth's house in my 10-year-old sedan. It was the neutral ground, the Switzerland of our family war. Ruth was Denise's older sister, a woman who preferred baking pies to confronting reality, but she was fair in her own passive way. When I walked into the living room, the tableau was already set. Denise was sitting on the floral sofa, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She was wearing a modest gray dress, looking every inch the suffering matriarch. Blair was sitting next to her, holding her hand. Blair looked perfect. She was wearing a soft cashmere sweater in a pale pink that made her look innocent, angelic. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, romantic bun. When I walked in, she looked up with wide, sorrowful eyes. Cassie, Blair breathed. She stood up and took a step toward me, arms open. Oh, Cassie, thank God you are here. Mom has been a wreck. We have been so worried about you. It was a brilliant performance. If I hadn't seen her credit card charges for bottle service at nightclubs, I might have believed it. I stepped back, avoiding her hug. Sit down, Blair. Blair's face fell. She looked at Aunt Ruth, who was standing by the fireplace, looking anxious. See, Blair said to Ruth, her voice trembling. She is so cold. We just want to love her, and she pushes us away. I am not here for a hug, I said. I walked to the coffee table and placed a heavy banker's box on it. I am here to clear the air. There is nothing to clear, Denise sniffed. You cut off my power. You embarrassed us. It is cruel. Cassandra. Let us talk about cruelty, I said. I opened the box. I took out the first stack of papers, the credit card statements. 3 years of charges, $25,000, all in my name, all authorized by you. Ruth stepped forward, adjusting her glasses. Cassandra, surely there is a misunderstanding. Your mother said she was managing your finances for you. Managing. I laughed. I handed Ruth a sheet of paper. This is a credit application for a store card. Look at the income listed. $80,000 a year. At the time this was signed, I was making $12 an hour at a call center. That is fraud. Aunt Ruth. Ruth looked at the paper, then at Denise. Denise. It was an estimate, Denise snapped. I was manifesting success for her. I bought those things for the family image. It benefits her too. I have never seen that handbag, I said. And I certainly never saw the inside of that penthouse. Blair sighed. A soft, pitiful sound. She reached out and touched Denise's arm, but I saw her fingers dig in a subtle, sharp pinch, a trigger. Mom, Blair said softly. Maybe Cassie is just having money trouble. You know how she gets when she is stressed. She lashes out. Remember when she stole from you before she left home? The lie was so smooth, so rehearsed, and it worked. Denise's eyes flared. That is right, Denise said, sitting up straighter. You stole $3,000 from me before you ran away. And now you accuse me I was recouping my losses. I earned that money, I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. You stole it to buy her a dress. I pointed at Blair. Don't yell at Mommy, Blair shouted, suddenly jumping to her feet. God, you are so aggressive. This is why Dad left. This is why nobody wants you around. The room went dead silent. The comment about our father who had died of a heart attack when I was 10 was a low blow. Even for them. I looked at Blair. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were hard, glittering with triumph. She wanted me to scream. She wanted me to flip the table. She wanted me to prove that I was the unstable, violent one, so that Ruth would dismiss the evidence in the box. I took a deep breath. In, out. I looked at the fire crackling in the hearth. I am not going to fight you, I said softly. Because you know you are wrong. Blair smirked. No, I said, because I do not negotiate with criminals. I turned to Aunt Ruth. I have filed a police report for identity theft. I have disputed every debt, and I have notified the fraud departments of every bank involved. Denise's face went pale. You went to the police. I did, I said. But that is not the worst part. I reached into the box and pulled out the single sheet of paper that mattered most. The rapid cash loan application with the forged signature of Gideon Hawthorne. I know about the trust, I said. The air left the room. Denise stopped breathing. Blair froze, her hand halfway to her mouth. I know you used my name to get Grandpa to release funds, I said, looking directly at Denise. I know you forged his signature on the collateral agreement, and I know that is a federal crime. You don't know what you are talking about, Denise stammered. Gideon wanted to help you. He signed it. Did he? I asked. Then why does the signature look like it was written by someone holding his hand? He is old, Blair shouted. His hands shake. We will see, I said, because I am sending a copy of this to his attorneys. You wouldn't? Denise whispered. Her eyes were wide with genuine terror now. He will cut us all off. He will destroy the family. You already destroyed the family, I said. I am just burying the body. I closed the box. I didn't wait for a rebuttal. I didn't wait for Ruth to bake a pie. I turned and walked toward the door. If you send that, Denise screamed after me, I will deny it. I will say you forged it. No one will believe the girl who lives above a bakery over her own mother. I walked out to my car. My hands were trembling now. The adrenaline crash hitting me hard. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, trying to regulate my breathing. I had done it. I had declared war. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another threat from Denise, but it was an email. The notification was simple. Stark white text against a dark background. From Office of Gideon Hawthorne, Executive Assistant Subject Inquiry regarding File 892-B. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the screen. I opened it. Dear Ms. Hawthorne, Mr. Gideon Hawthorne has been notified of a credit dispute involving your Social Security number and the Hawthorne Family Trust collateral. He has requested a private explanation regarding why your name appears on a loan document he does not recall authorizing in full capacity. He is currently at the estate. He is expecting a response. I looked up at the house, through the window. I could see Denise and Blair arguing, their arms waving, their perfect facade crumbling. They thought they were fighting me. They didn't realize I had just summoned the only person they were truly afraid of. I typed a reply. Tell him I'm ready to talk. The living room of Aunt Ruth's house, usually reserved for Christmas carols and polite tea service, had been transformed into a kangaroo court. When I had agreed to this meeting, I assumed it would be just the core combatants, me, Denise, Blair, and Ruth, but Denise, true to her nature, had decided that a public execution was better than a private conversation. She had summoned the cavalry. My Uncle Miller was there, nursing a scotch in the corner. 2 of my cousins, who I had not spoken to since high school, sat on the ottoman, looking at their phones but listening intently. A few neighbors from the church committee were even seated near the kitchen, clutching their handbags as if I were going to rob them. Denise had set the stage perfectly. She sat in the center of the room on the plush velvet armchair, looking small and fragile. She held a tissue to her nose. Blair sat on the floor at her feet, her head resting on Denise's knee, creating a tableau of mother-daughter devotion that was designed to make me look like the monster who was trying to tear them apart. I just do not understand, Blair sobbed, her voice carrying clearly across the room. We tried to help her. Mom sent her money. We gave her space, and now she comes back and accuses us of stealing. It is sick. She is just greedy because she saw us doing well and she wants a piece of it. It is the resentment, Denise added, her voice trembling. She always hated that Blair was happy. She could never stand it. Uncle Miller shook his head, looking at me with disappointment. Family is family. Cassandra, you do not drag your mother's name through the mud over a misunderstanding. I stood by the fireplace, my back straight. I did not sit. I did not accept the glass of water Ruth offered me. I was not a guest. I was the prosecutor. Are you finished? I asked. My voice cut through the murmurs like a scalpel. Blair looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. No, we are not finished. You need to apologize to Mom. You need to drop this insane police report and admit you made a mistake. I did not make a mistake, I said, and I am not here to apologize. I am here to present the exhibits. I walked over to the large oak coffee table in the center of the room. I ignored the gasps as I swept a decorative bowl of potpourri to the side to make space. I placed my heavy banker's box down. You told everyone I am greedy, I said, opening the lid. You told them I am making this up. So, let us look at the receipts. I pulled out the first file. It was thick, clipped together with red binders. Exhibit A, I said, my voice clinical. The credit card opened in my name 3 years ago, the one used to purchase $5,000 worth of designer furniture for the penthouse. I slid the papers across the table toward Aunt Ruth. She was the matriarch's sister, the moral compass everyone pretended to follow. If I broke Ruth, I broke the room. Ruth, please look at the billing address, I said. Ruth hesitated. She looked at Denise, who gave her a nod of confident encouragement. Denise thought she was safe. She thought her lies were bulletproof. Ruth picked up the statement. She squinted at the address line. It is the commercial property on Elm Street, Ruth said. Your old shop location. Denise? So, Denise scoffed. I let Cassandra use that address for her mail so she wouldn't have to worry about porch pirates at her apartment. I was doing her a favor. Keep reading, I said. Look at the signature on the charge slip for the Italian sofa. Ruth flipped the page. She stared at the signature. It read, Cassandra Hawthorne, but the loops were wide and flamboyant. Ruth's face went pale. She looked up at Denise. Then she looked back at the paper. Denise, Ruth whispered. This is your handwriting. The room went quiet. Don't be ridiculous, Denise snapped. Cassandra has similar handwriting to mine. I taught her how to write. No, Ruth said, her voice shaking. You make your H with a double loop at the top. Our mother did it that way. I do it that way. Cassandra prints her letters. She always has. That proves nothing, Blair shouted, jumping in to save the narrative. Cassandra probably forged Mom's handwriting to frame her. She is obsessed with ruining us. I figured you would say that, I said. I reached back into the box. Exhibit B, I announced. The alibi. I pulled out a series of large, printed photographs and slapped them onto the table. They were grainy stills from a security camera. This is a time-stamped photo from the security system at North Pine Service Center, I said, pointing to the date in the corner. November 14th, 7 o'clock in the evening to 4 o'clock in the morning, that is me, in my cubicle. Wearing my ID badge, I pulled out another paper. And this is a credit card transaction for a dinner at Le Jardin, a French bistro in the city. The bill was $400. The time of the transaction was 8:30 in the evening on November 14th. I looked around the room, making eye contact with Uncle Miller, with the cousins, with the neighbors. Unless I have the ability to be in two places at once, I said. I did not buy that dinner, but you know who posted a photo of escargot on Instagram that night? I dropped a screenshot of Blair's Instagram feed onto the pile. Blair did, I said. Caption treating myself. Blair's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The victim mask was slipping, revealing the panic underneath. You stalker, Blair shrieked. You are stalking me. I am auditing you, I corrected her. There is a difference. I wasn't done. I pulled out the utility bills, the car loan, the personal loan. For every debt, I had a corresponding work schedule, a class attendance record, or a GPS log from my phone proving I was nowhere near the point of sale. The pile of evidence grew higher. The silence in the room grew heavier. The neighbors were shifting uncomfortably, realizing they had been invited to witness a crime, not a family reunion. Denise saw her audience turning. She stood up, her face flushed with blotchy red patches. Enough, she screamed. She swiped her hand across the table, knocking some of the papers onto the floor. I do not care about your little charts. We are families share. I used your credit because you had good credit, and we needed to maintain our standing. I was going to pay it back. So you admit it? I asked. I admit that I did what I had to do to survive, Denise yelled. And you should be honored to help your family instead. You are treating this like a business transaction. It is a business transaction when you steal $25,000, I said. It is private. Denise gestured wildly to the people in the room. Everyone here knows that family matters stay behind closed doors. You do not air dirty laundry in public. You do not go to the police. You solve it at the dinner table. She looked at Uncle Miller for support. Tell her, Miller, tell her that what happens in this house stays in this house. Miller looked at his shoes. He did not speak. I stepped closer to my mother. I was taller than her now. I wasn't the teenager who shrank away from her anger. You love closed doors, Mother, I said softly. Because behind closed doors, you can lie. You can manipulate. You can steal from your own children and call it love. I pointed to the door leading to the hallway. You close doors to hide what you are, I said. I am opening them so I can breathe. I am opening them so I can live. You are ungrateful trash, Denise spat. If you do not drop this, I will make sure you never see a dime of the inheritance. I will make sure Gideon knows exactly what kind of traitor you are. About that, I said. I reached into the box one last time. I pulled out the document I had found at the legal clinic, the collateral agreement for the loan against the trust. You mentioned Gideon, I said. Let us talk about him. Put that away, Blair hissed. She looked terrified. This is an authorization form, I said to the room. It allows the bank to lend money against the future assets of the Hawthorne Family Trust. It requires 2 signatures, the beneficiary me, and the trustee Gideon. I held the paper up. I did not sign this, I said. And looking at this shaky, pathetic scrawl at the bottom, I do not think Gideon signed it either. He did, Denise shouted. He signed it right at his desk. I was there. You were there, I asked. You guided his hand. I helped him, Denise said. He is old. He forgets things I help him manage his affairs. You forged his signature, I said, and that is not just theft. Mother, that is elder abuse. That is a felony that carries a mandatory prison sentence. You have no proof, Blair screamed. It is your word against ours, and Grandpa will never talk to you. He hates you. The sound of a heavy car door slamming outside cut through the shouting. Then, another door. Then, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a cane on the pavement leading up to the porch. Denise froze. Her eyes went to the front window. The front door did not just open. It was unsealed. A gust of wind blew in, followed by a man in a dark suit, a security detail. He stepped aside, and then Gideon Hawthorne walked in. He was 80 years old, but he looked like a mountain that had weathered a storm. He was wearing a three-piece suit that cost more than the house we were standing in. He leaned on a cane with a silver handle, but his back was straight. His eyes, sharp and blue, scanned the room like a hawk looking for a field mouse. Behind him stood two men carrying briefcases, lawyers. The room went so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Denise looked like she had seen a ghost. Her face drained of all color, leaving her looking gray and ash-like. "Daddy," she whispered. Gideon did not look at her. He walked past the neighbors, past Uncle Miller, past Blair, who was trying to shrink into the carpet. He walked straight to the coffee table. He looked at the mess of papers. He looked at the charts. He looked at the photos of me at work. Then, he looked at me. It was the first time I had seen my grandfather in 10 years. He looked older, yes, but the intelligence in his eyes was undimmed. There was no confusion. There was no senility. Denise had lied about that too. "Cassandra," he said. His voice was a deep rumble, gravel and authority. "Grandfather," I said. He turned slowly to face Denise. The look on his face was not anger. It was something far worse. It was disappointing, absolute, crushing disappointment. "I received an email," Gideon said, "from my granddaughter. She told me she was being accused of borrowing money against my trust." "Daddy, it is a lie," Denise cried out, rushing toward him. "She is lying. She is trying to trick you." Gideon held up a hand. Denise stopped in her tracks. "I brought my own file," Gideon said. He gestured to one of the lawyers, who stepped forward and opened a briefcase. He pulled out a single, crisp document. It was the original copy of the loan agreement that the bank had on file. Gideon looked at the signature at the bottom. Then he looked at Denise. "I have not signed a document authorizing a loan for 20 years," Gideon said. "My hands shake, Denise, but my mind does not. I know what I sign." He held the paper out toward her. "So I came here to ask you one question," Gideon said, his voice filling the room, leaving no space for excuses. "Who signed my name?" Denise couldn't speak. She looked at Blair. Blair looked away. "Was it you?" Gideon asked, his voice rising. "Or did you teach your daughter to commit crimes for you, just like you taught her to spend money she did not earn?" I was trying to save the family," Denise sobbed, collapsing onto the sofa. "We were broke, Daddy. The dividends weren't enough. I need to keep up appearances." "So you stole from your daughter," Gideon said, "and then you stole from me." He turned back to me. For the first time, his expression softened. He looked at the cheap suit I was wearing. He looked at the defiance in my jaw, a jaw I had inherited from him. "You have the evidence?" Gideon asked me. "I have everything," I said. "Good," Gideon said. He looked at his lawyers. "Take it all. We are leaving." He looked back at Denise. "You wanted to keep family business private, Denise?" Gideon said. "You got your wish. You are no longer part of this family." The silence that followed Gideon Hawthorne's departure from Aunt Ruth's house was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum before an explosion. My mother and sister did not retreat to lick their wounds. They reloaded. 48 hours after the confrontation, I was sitting at my desk at the Civic Shield Legal Clinic, reviewing my case file with Mr. Vance, when the courier arrived. He dropped a thick envelope on the desk. It was not an apology letter. It was a cease and desist order. Denise was threatening to sue me for defamation of character, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and harassment. She was also petitioning for an emergency restraining order, claiming that my erratic behavior and obsessive stalking posed a threat to her safety and Blair's mental health. I stared at the papers. The audacity was breathtaking. They had stolen my identity, yet they were painting me as the aggressor. "This is standard," Mr. Vance said, pushing his glasses up his nose. He did not look worried. "It is called a SLAP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. They are trying to bury you in papers so you run out of money and drop the fraud investigation." "I do not have money to run out of," I said dryly. "Exactly," Vance said. "That is why you have me. Do not respond to this. Do not text them. Do not email them. If you breathe in their direction, they will use it to claim you are violating their boundaries." But the legal threats were just the first wave. The second wave was social. That evening, a link popped up on my phone. It was from the Briarhaven Observer, a local digital rag that covered town gossip and socialite news. The headline screamed in bold, black letters, "The prodigal daughter returns for the cash. How one local family is being terrorized by a greedy heir." The article was anonymous. Of course, it described a heartbroken mother and a rising star sister who were being harassed by an estranged sibling who had returned after 10 years solely to extort money from their elderly grandfather. It claimed I was unstable. It claimed I had a history of drug abuse, a complete fabrication. It claimed I had abandoned the family when they needed me most and was now jealous of my sister's success. I read it in my car outside my apartment. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. It was a masterpiece of fiction, clearly dictated by Denise to whatever friend she had running the blog. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post a rebuttal. I wanted to upload the police report and the forged signatures for the whole world to see. But I remembered Vance's advice. Do not take the bait. "Let them talk," I whispered to the empty car. Paper trails last longer than rumors. While I was fighting the battle in the court of public opinion, Gideon was fighting a much quieter, deadlier war inside the corporate offices of Hawthorne Holdings. He had not returned to his estate to rest. He had gone straight to the headquarters. He summoned the internal audit team, a team that had been handpicked by Denise years ago, and fired the head auditor on the spot. He brought in an external firm from Chicago, a team of forensic accountants who had no loyalty to anyone but the truth. They started digging. I did not know the details at the time, but the external auditors found something that made the identity theft look like petty cash theft. They found a company called Verdant Ventures, LLC. It was buried deep in the supply chain of Hawthorne Holdings. On paper, it was a consulting firm providing logistical oversight for the company's shipping routes. In reality, it was a ghost. It had no office. It had no employees. It had a single bank account in Delaware, and the signatory on that account was a registered agent who led back to a trust. And the beneficiary of that trust was Blair Hawthorne for 3 years. Verdant Ventures had been billing Hawthorne Holdings for services it never rendered. $20,000 here, $50,000 there. It added up to nearly $500,000 siphoned out of the company my grandfather built. I found out about this not from Gideon, but from the most unexpected source, Marion Klein. I was at North Pine the next night, trying to focus on a payroll spreadsheet. When Marion walked into my cubicle, she looked pale. She was holding a tablet, and her hand was shaking slightly. "Hawthorne," she said. She never used first names. "I need you to look at this." I looked at the screen. It was a news alert about the external audit at Hawthorne Holdings. The rumor mill was churning. "I know," I said. "My grandfather ordered it." "No," Marion said, her voice tight. "Look at the name of the previous auditor listed in the article, the one who signed off on the books for the last 5 years. I read the name. Preston Associates. "I used to work for them," Marion said. She pulled up a chair, her usual steely demeanor cracking just enough to show the anger underneath. 15 years ago, I was a junior associate. I was assigned to the Hawthorne account." My eyes widened. You audited my family's company. I tried to, Marion said. I found a pattern. Vendor payments going to shell companies with no physical addresses, invoices for consulting that had no deliverables attached. I flagged it. I brought it to my partner. What happened? I asked. I was fired 2 days later. Marion said. They told me I was not a good cultural fit. They buried my report. I always wondered who was behind those shell companies. I thought it was just corrupt management. She looked at me, her eyes hard. It wasn't management, was it? Marion asked. It was the family. It was Denise, I said, the realization clicking into place. She has been doing this for 15 years. Blair is just the new accomplice. Denise taught her how to set up the shells. Marion sat back, letting out a long breath. Then you nail them, she said. You nail them to the wall. If you need a witness to testify about the historical pattern of fraud, you call me. I kept my notes. I looked at this woman, my tough-as-nails boss who had taught me everything I knew about survival, and I felt a surge of gratitude that almost brought me to tears. Thank you, Marion, I said. Do not thank me, she snapped, standing up and smoothing her skirt. Just get back to work and destroy them. The pressure on Denise must have become unbearable, because 2 days later, she broke. She did not call my lawyer. She called me. I was walking out of the grocery store, carrying a bag of spinach and cheap pasta. When my phone rang, I saw the number. I debated ignoring it, but something told me this was the endgame. I answered. Cassandra, Denise said. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was soft, shaky, stripped of all its usual imperious armor. Cassandra, baby, please do not hang up. I am recording this call, I said instantly. That is fine, she said quickly. Record it. I want you to hear me. I want to apologize. I stopped walking. I stood on the sidewalk, the plastic bag cutting into my fingers. You want to do what? I am sorry. Denise wept. I am so sorry. I lost my way. I was so scared of losing the lifestyle, of losing our standing in the community. I thought I was protecting the legacy for you girls. I never meant to hurt you. It sounded convincing. If I were 10 years younger, I would have dropped the groceries and run to her. But I was not 10 years younger. I was 27, and I had $25,000 of debt in my name that said otherwise. You filed a restraining order against me yesterday. Mother, I said, you had a blog that said that I am a drug addict. Is that how you apologize? I was panicked, she cried. Blair made me do it. She was so scared. But we can fix this. We can fix everything. I have a proposal. I am listening, I said, my voice cold. I will pay it off, Denise said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. All of it. The credit cards, the loans. I will write a check tomorrow. I will sell the jewelry. I will sell the car. You will be debt-free. You will have a clean slate. I will even give you $50,000 cash to start your life over. Just think of it. Cassie, no more debt. A fresh start. And the condition, I asked. You drop the police report, she said. You tell Gideon it was a misunderstanding. You tell him you authorized the loan but forgot. You save the family from this humiliation, and you walk away with $50,000. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath of the cool evening air. She was trying to buy me. She was trying to bribe me with money she would probably steal from someone else. She wanted me to lie to the only man who had stood up for me. She wanted me to take the fall, to look like the incompetent, forgetful granddaughter, so she could keep her claws in the estate. No, I said. What? Denise sounded stunned. Cassandra, be reasonable. $50,000. That is more cash than you have likely seen in your entire life. I do not care if it is $5 million, I said. Why? She screamed, the mask slipping again. Why are you doing this to me? Because you stole my future, I said. You stole my name. You stole my credit. You stole 10 years of having a grandfather. And now you think you can buy me off like a cheap contractor. I am your mother. Then act like it, I said. Go to the police station. Turn yourself in. Admit what you did. That is the only deal I am accepting. You are a monster, Denise hissed. You will regret this. I do not negotiate with terrorists. Mother, I said. And I certainly do not negotiate with people who eat their own young. I hung up. My hand was shaking. But this time, it was not from fear. It was from the sheer, raw power of saying no. While Denise was trying to bribe me, Blair was trying to charm the king. She drove to the Hawthorne estate that afternoon. She knew Gideon was there. She knew he was reviewing the trust documents. She thought she could outsmart an 80-year-old man because she saw age as weakness. She found him in his study, surrounded by boxes of files. Grandpa, Blair asked, standing in the doorway, wearing her most demure dress. I brought you some tea. I know this has been so hard on you. Gideon looked up from his desk. He did not smile. Sit down, Blair, he said. Blair sat. She crossed her ankles. She smiled. I just wanted to say, I know Cassandra has caused a lot of trouble, but I want you to know that I'm here. I have always been here. I have been helping Mom manage the accounts because, well, she gets confused. I am the only one who really knows the business. Is that so? Gideon asked. He leaned back in his leather chair. You know the business inside and out. Yes, sir, Blair said confidently. I know every account. Good, Gideon said. Then you can help me with something. I was looking for the quarterly report on the Zurich Preservation Fund, the account we use for the European assets. I can't seem to find the login credentials. Do you have them? Blair's eyes lit up. This was her chance to prove she was indispensable. She didn't know the specific account, but she knew she had to look competent. She had to look like she was on the inside. Oh, the Zurich Fund, Blair said, nodding sagely. Yes, of course. Mom and I moved those assets last month to a more secure yield. I have the new paperwork in my office. I can bring it to you tomorrow. It is doing very well. By the way, up 7%. Gideon stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. The silence stretched until Blair's smile began to twitch. The Zurich Preservation Fund, Gideon said slowly, was closed in 1998. Before you were born. Blair's face went white. I must have confused it with, she stammered. There is no Zurich Fund. Blair, Gideon said, his voice like thunder rolling in the distance. I made it up. I tested you, and you lied. You looked me in the eye and lied about money that does not exist. He stood up. He looked at her with a disdain that was absolute. You are not a businesswoman, Gideon said. You are a con artist, and you are not even a good one. Grandpa, please, Blair cried, standing up. I was just trying to be helpful. Get out of my house, Gideon said. He did not wait for her to leave. He picked up the phone on his desk. He dialed a number. Blair stood there, frozen, as she heard him speak to his lead attorney. Sterling, Gideon said. It is time. Activate Clause 74 of the Family Trust. Yes, the nuclear option. He paused, listening to the lawyer on the other end. I do not care if it is unprecedented, Gideon said. Call an extraordinary meeting of the shareholders, mandatory attendance, and send an official invitation to Cassandra Hawthorne. I want her in the room when the hammer falls. He hung up the phone. He looked at Blair one last time. The game is over. Blair, he said, tell your mother to wear black. It will be appropriate for the occasion. I received the email the next morning. It was not a court summons. It was an invitation. Notice of extraordinary shareholder meeting. Hawthorne Holdings. Authorized by Gideon Hawthorne. Trustee, invitee Cassandra Hawthorne. Agenda restructuring of executive control. I looked at the screen. I looked at the date. It was for tomorrow. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Vance. Do you have a suit? I asked him. I have one for court, he said, confused. Why? Because we are not going to court, I said. We are going to a board meeting, and I think we are going to own the place. Walking into the headquarters of Hawthorne Holdings felt less like entering a corporate office and more like stepping into a fortress built to keep people like me out. The building was a monolith of glass and steel that scraped the gray sky of the city, reflecting the clouds so perfectly that the tower seemed to disappear into the gloom. I have walked past this building 1,000 times in the last 10 years. I had looked up at the 45th floor from the sidewalk, wondering if my grandfather was up there, wondering if he ever thought about the granddaughter who vanished, but I had never been invited inside. Until today, the lobby was a cavern of marble and silence. The air was chilled to a precise, expensive temperature. When I approached the reception desk, the security guard stepped in front of me before I could even open my mouth. "Deliveries are around the back, miss," he said. He did not look at my face. He looked at my shoes. They were sensible, affordable loafers, not the red-bottomed heels that usually clicked across these floors. "I am not a delivery driver," I said. My voice was calm, echoing slightly in the vast space. "I am Cassandra Hawthorne. I have a meeting with the chairman." The guard blinked. He looked at his tablet, then back at me. The name Hawthorne was royalty in this building. To hear it come from someone wearing a department store suit clearly caused a short circuit in his training. I will need to verify that," he stammered. "Go ahead," I said. He made a call. A moment later, his posture stiffened. "Yes, sir, I understand. Immediately." He hung up and looked at me with a new, terrified respect. "Mr. Sterling is coming down to escort you personally." Sterling, the company's general counsel, the man who had likely drafted the paperwork that cut me out of the family trust years ago. When the elevator doors opened, Sterling did not look happy. He was a man who wore his arrogance like a second skin. But today, he looked harried. He walked toward me with a tight, predatory smile. "Ms. Hawthorne," he said, extending a hand I did not shake. "This is unexpected. Your grandfather is in a delicate state. We usually require a vetting process for estranged relatives." "I was invited," I said, holding up my phone with the email from Gideon's office. "Of course," Sterling said, his eyes narrowing. "Before we go up, there is just a small administrative matter, standard procedure for non-employees entering the executive suite." He pulled a folder from under his arm and offered it to me. "A non-disclosure agreement," he said. "It simply states that anything you see, hear, or discuss upstairs remains the property of Hawthorne Holdings. Standard. Just sign here." I took the folder. I opened it. I scanned the first paragraph. It was not standard. It was a gag order. It had a clause that would retroactively prohibit me from discussing family financial matters with third parties, which would effectively nullify my ability to talk to the police or my lawyer about the fraud. "No," I said. I closed the folder and handed it back to him. Sterling's smile vanished. "Excuse me. I am not signing that," I said. "I have my own legal counsel. Mr. Vance. He advised me not to sign anything without his review, and considering this document attempts to obstruct an active criminal investigation regarding identity theft, I think he would have a field day with it." Sterling stepped closer, invading my personal space. "Listen to me, young lady. You are walking into a lion's den. You think because you have a little police report you can dictate terms here. We can bury you in litigation for 20 years. Sign the paper." I looked him in the eye. "If you want to bury me, Mr. Sterling, you better bring a bigger shovel. Take me to my grandfather. Now." He stared at me for a long beat, searching for the fear that used to define me. He didn't find it. He turned on his heel and swiped his badge at the turnstile. "Follow me." The ride to the top floor was silent. When the doors opened, the executive suite was buzzing with a nervous energy. Assistants were whispering in huddles. Phones were ringing. It felt like a war room. Sterling led me to the double doors at the end of the hall. "He is waiting." I pushed the doors open and walked in. Gideon Hawthorne was sitting behind a desk that looked large enough to land a plane on. The room was lined with books and smelled of cedar and old paper. He was not looking at the view. He was looking at a photograph in a silver frame on his desk. "Close the door," he said without looking up. I closed it. The sound shut out the noise of the office, creating a sudden, heavy intimacy. "Sit," he said. I sat in one of the leather chairs opposite him. I placed my heavy bag on the floor. Gideon finally looked at me. His face was lined with the map of 80 years of hard decisions. He looked tired, not sleepy, but weary in his soul. "You look like your father," he said. He had that same stubborn set to his jaw. "I have been told I take after my mother," I said. "No," Gideon said sharply. "You have her coloring. You do not have her nature. Denise is a chameleon. She changes to fit whatever room she is in. You are a rock. You disrupt the room." He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the desk. "I read your file," he said. "The police report, the credit dispute. It is a mess. Cassandra." "It is a crime," I corrected him. "I am not asking for semantics," Gideon said. "I am asking for the truth. Denise was here yesterday. She sat in that chair and swore on her life that she only borrowed your name to protect your assets. She said you agreed to it verbally. She said you are twisting the story to extort money from me because you are failing in life." He looked at me with piercing blue eyes. "Is that true?" he asked. "Are you failing?" I did not get angry. I reached into my bag and pulled out my portfolio. It was not the chaotic box I had brought to Aunt Ruth's. This was a presentation. "I put myself through community college while working the night shift at a logistics center," I said, placing the first document on the desk. "I graduated with honors. I am a senior analyst at North Pine. I have a savings rate of 20% of my income. I have never missed a rent payment. I have never asked anyone for a dime." I laid out the timeline of the fraud next to my transcript. "This is not the resume of a failure. Grandfather, this is the resume of a survivor." Then, I laid out the war file, the forged trust documents, the fake signatures, the shell company payments I had found at North Pine. "I am not here to ask you for money," I said. "I am here to show you that the people you trusted to run your empire are eating it from the inside out." Gideon picked up the papers. He put on his reading glasses. He went through them slowly, methodically. He paused at the forged signature on the loan document. He traced the shaky lines with his thumb. "She used my name," he whispered. "She used my name to steal from you. She used us both," I said. Gideon took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. For a moment, he looked incredibly old. "I wrote to you," he said. The words hung in the air. I froze. "What?" "When you left," Gideon said. "When Denise told me you had run away with a boy and didn't want to be found, I wrote to you. I sent letters to the P.O. box. Denise gave me. I sent birthday cards. I sent offers to pay for college. I told you that you always had a place here." My chest tightened. "I never got them. I never got anything." "I know," Gideon said. His voice broke slightly. "I checked the tracking on the last package I sent. It was signed by D. Hawthorne. She intercepted them. She told me you were returning them unopened because you hated us. She told me you wanted nothing to do with me." He looked at me, and I saw a flash of pain that mirrored my own. "She isolated us," Gideon said. "She knew that if we talked, her game would be over. She needed me to think you were a villain so she could justify taking your share, and she needed you to think I was a monster so you wouldn't come to me for help." I felt tears pricking my eyes, but I blinked them back. This was not the time to cry. This was the time to sharpen the knife. "So," I said, my voice steady, "now you know." "Yes," Gideon said. "Now I know." He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the mahogany surface toward me. It was a blank check. "I can write a number on this right now," Gideon said. $1 million, $2 million, enough to pay off your debts, buy a house, and disappear to an island where no one knows your name. You can have peace, Cassandra. You can walk away from this toxic mess and never look back." I looked at the check. It was freedom. It was the easy way out. "Or," I asked. Gideon smiled, a grim, wolfish smile. "Or," he said, "you can tear up that check. You can come work for me, not as an employee, but as my proxy. You can help me clean the house. You can hunt them down, penny by penny. You can drag every secret they have into the light. It will be ugly. They will attack you. The press will vilify you. But at the end of it, you will own the place. He leaned back. So, Cassandra, do you want justice or do you want power? I looked at the check. I thought about the cold nights in my car. I thought about the $12 in my bank account. I thought about Denise laughing at me in the boardroom. Justice was putting them in jail. Power was making sure they could never hurt anyone again. I reached out and picked up the check. Gideon's face fell slightly. Then, I tore it in half, and then in half again. I dropped the confetti onto his desk. I do not want your money, I said, and I do not have to choose between justice and power. I am going to take both. Gideon's smile returned, and this time, it reached his eyes. Good, he said. Then let us get to work. The shareholder meeting is in 48 hours. We have a lot of bodies to dig up. For the next 2 days, I did not leave the building. Gideon gave me a temporary office next to his. I was given access to the internal servers, the real ones, not the sanitized versions Denise showed the board. I worked with the forensic auditors. We followed the digital trail of breadcrumbs Denise and Blair had left behind. It was arrogant. They had been so sure they would never be caught that they barely hid it. But outside the building, the war was getting dirty. Blair had launched her charm offensive. On the morning of the second day, I walked into the lobby to get coffee and saw a phalanx of cameras outside the glass doors. Blair was there, standing on the steps, wearing a modest white dress. She looked like a saint. She spotted me through the glass. She waved, a sad, hopeful wave for the cameras. She started walking toward the doors, the reporters trailing her like a pack of dogs. Cassandra, she called out, her voice muffled by the glass, but clear enough. Cassandra, please, let us talk. Mom is so worried. She wanted a scene. She wanted me to storm out and yell at her so the cameras could capture the unstable, angry sister attacking the peaceful, loving angel. I stopped. I took a sip of my coffee. I looked at her. Then, I turned my back. I walked to the elevator, ignoring her pounding on the glass. I let the doors close on her performance. I denied her the oxygen she needed to fuel her fire. Back in my office, I found the smoking gun. I was tracking a series of stock purchases. Someone had been aggressively buying up Class B non-voting shares of Hawthorne Holdings for the last 6 months. It was a creeping acquisition, done in small enough chunks to avoid triggering an automatic SEC filing. The buyer was a company called Phoenix Horizon LLC. I ran a trace on the entity. It was registered in Nevada. The registered agent was a generic law firm. It seemed like a dead end. But then I cross-referenced the funding source for Phoenix Horizon. The money was coming from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I remembered the consulting fees I had seen at North Pine. The money Denise and Blair had siphoned out of the company through their shell companies. I pulled up the transaction logs. The dates matched perfectly. Every time Verdant Ventures Blair's shell company received a payment from Hawthorne Holdings, Phoenix Horizon bought stock 3 days later. My blood ran cold. They weren't just stealing money to buy handbags. They were stealing money from the company to buy the company. They were using Gideon's own money to purchase a controlling stake in his empire right under his nose. They were preparing for a hostile takeover. They were waiting for him to die, or for him to be declared incompetent, so they could combine their stolen shares with the inheritance and push him out completely. I clicked on the shareholder registry. I summed up the shares owned by Phoenix Horizon, 12%. Combined with the shares Denise already held in her own name and the shares Blair had been gifted, they were 48%. They were 3% away from absolute control. If Gideon died tomorrow, they would win. If they managed to force a vote on his mental competency, they would win. I printed the report. My hands were shaking. I picked up the phone and dialed Gideon's extension. "We have a problem," I said. "It is not just fraud. Grandfather, it is a coup." "What do you mean?" Gideon asked. "Denise isn't just a thief," I said, staring at the numbers that spelled out their betrayal. "She is the majority shareholder in waiting, and the entity she is using to buy the stock. She is funding it with the money she stole from you." There was silence on the line. Then, Gideon's voice came back, cold as ice. "Bring the file," he said. "The meeting is tomorrow, and I think it is time we introduced your mother to the consequences of her ambition." The extraordinary general meeting of Hawthorne Holdings was scheduled for 9 o'clock in the morning. The boardroom was not just a room today, it was a gladiatorial arena paneled in mahogany and glass. I arrived at 8:55. The atmosphere inside was suffocating. Every seat at the long oval table was taken. On one side sat the independent board members, men and women in dark suits, who looked like they smelled blood in the water. On the other side sat the loyalists, the faction Denise had cultivated over years of galas and bribes, and at the head of the table, waiting for the chairman, sat Denise and Blair. They looked confident, too confident. They had done the math. They knew that between Denise's inherited shares, the shares held by Blair, and the 12% block they had secretly acquired through their shell company, Phoenix Horizon, they held nearly 48% of the vote. They only needed to sway one or two independent members to lock me out forever. When I walked in, Blair let out a theatrical sigh. "Security," Blair called out, not looking at me but addressing the room. "Why is she here? This is a shareholder meeting. She holds 0 shares. She was disowned 10 years ago. This is a waste of everyone's time." Sterling, the general counsel, looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. "Actually, Ms. Hawthorne has been invited by the chairman as a consultant." "A consultant?" Denise laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. "She manages invoices at a warehouse. What possible consultation can she offer a Fortune 500 company?" I walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. I placed my briefcase down. I did not sit. "I am not here as a consultant," I said. My voice was steady, projecting to the back of the room. "And I am not here as your daughter." "Then who are you?" a board member asked. He was a man named Mr. Henderson, a longtime ally of my grandfather. "I am the managing partner of Ravenvale Capital," I announced. A ripple of confusion went through the room. Whispers broke out. "Ravenvale. Who is Ravenvale?" Blair rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, did you register an LLC online yesterday just to sound important? You do not have any capital. Cassandra, you have student loans. Ravenvale Capital," I continued, ignoring her, "is the entity that currently holds the voting proxy for the Hawthorne Education and Advancement Trust, a trust that was established 20 years ago by Gideon Hawthorne for his grandchildren, a trust that has been accruing compound interest, untouched, because one grandchild was told it did not exist, and the other was too busy spending stolen money to look for it." Denise's face went slack. The Education Trust. It was the one financial vehicle Denise had never been able to access. Because the stipulations were ironclad, the funds could only be released to the direct beneficiary for educational or business venture purposes, and it required the beneficiary's biometric signature. Gideon had activated it for me 48 hours ago. It was not just a college fund, it was a war chest. "Ravenvale Capital," I said, leaning forward, "is now a registered interested party, and we are formally challenging the legitimacy of the shares held by Phoenix Horizon LLC." "You can't do that," Denise snapped, standing up. "Phoenix Horizon is a private investment firm. You have no right to pry into their ownership." "I have every right," I said, "because I can prove that Phoenix Horizon was funded with stolen corporate assets." I signaled to the external auditors who were waiting by the door. They stepped in, distributing thick packets of paper to every board member. "The document in front of you," I said, "traces the wire transfers from Hawthorne Holdings to a shell company called Verdant Ventures. Verdant Ventures lists its primary beneficiary as Blair Hawthorne." Blair gasped. She looked at the packet, her hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. "From Verdant Ventures," I continued, "the money was moved to an offshore account in the Caymans, and from that account, it was wired to Nevada to fund Phoenix Horizon, and Phoenix Horizon used that money to buy Hawthorne stock." I looked directly at Mr. Henderson. They did not buy those shares, sir, I said. They embezzled company funds to purchase the company from itself. It is not an acquisition, it is cannibalism. The room erupted. Is this true? Henderson demanded, turning on Denise. Did you use operating capital to buy voting stock? It is a fabrication, Denise shouted. She was losing control. Her face was flushed a deep, ugly red. She is lying. She is jealous. She is trying to destroy the company because she wasn't good enough to run it. The bank records do not lie. Mother, I said calmly. Page 10, the routing numbers match. You stole from the company to seize control of the company. The board members were flipping through the pages frantically. I saw the shift happen in real time. The loyalists were leaning away from Denise. The independent members were looking at her with open hostility. Panic set in. Blair, realizing the financial defense was crumbling, reached into her oversized designer bag. She has no standing, Blair shrieked. She pulled out a yellowed, crumpled piece of paper. She waved it in the air like a flag. Look at this. She signed it 10 years ago. Voluntary relinquishment of family privileges. She disowned herself. She is not a Hawthorne. She has no rights to the trust, no rights to the name, no rights to be in this room. She slammed the paper onto the table. It was the document I had signed the night I left, the paper Denise had forced on me. She signed it freely, Blair yelled. She walked out. She abandoned us. This proves she is a stranger. Sterling, the lawyer, picked up the paper. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at it for 3 seconds, then looked at Blair with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Ms. Blair, Sterling said dryly, this is written on personalized stationery. It is not notarized. It has no witnesses. And legally speaking, you cannot relinquish beneficiary rights to an irrevocable trust with a handwritten note. This piece of paper has the legal weight of a grocery list. But she signed it, Blair insisted, her voice shrill. Actually, I interrupted. Thank you for bringing that out. Blair, because that piece of paper proves duress. I walked over to the table and pointed at the date on the note. I signed that the night I was kicked out, I said to the board. I was 17. I was threatened with homelessness. I was coerced into signing a document to renounce my rights in exchange for nothing in a court of law. That is evidence of emotional abuse and extortion. I looked at Denise. You kept it as a trophy, I said. Now it is a weapon, but it is pointing at you. Denise sank back into her chair. She looked small. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the desperate, feral look of an animal trapped in a corner. She looked around the room. No one was making eye contact with her. She cleared her throat. She tried to smile, but it looked like a rictus of pain. Can we... she started, her voice barely a whisper. She looked at me. Cassandra, can we take a recess? Just 5 minutes. Family only. No, Henderson said. We are in session. Please, Denise begged. She stood up and walked toward me, her hands clasped. Cassandra, daughter, please. I looked at the board members. They were watching us. I nodded once. 5 minutes, I said. We stepped into the small anteroom adjoining the boardroom. As soon as the door clicked shut, Denise dropped the act. She did not hug me. She did not cry. She leaned against the wall, her eyes hard. How much? She asked. Excuse me. How much will this stop? Denise hissed. You want money? Fine. You win. We will liquidate the Phoenix shares. We will give you half. That is $10 million. Cassandra, 10 million. You can take it and go. You can be rich. You can be free. I am already free, I said. Don't be stupid, she snapped. If you push this to a vote, if you push for a criminal investigation, the stock price will tank. The company will be ruined. You will be queen of a pile of ashes. Take the deal. Take the money. Blair and I will step down from the board. We will keep our personal shares, and we will leave you alone. So you can keep the money you stole, I asked. So you can retire to a villa in France with the millions you siphoned off while I was eating instant noodles. It is a win-win, Denise insisted. You get rich. We get to survive. That is business. Cassandra, everyone walks away with something. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, and I realized she truly did not understand what she had done. She thought this was a transaction. She thought the pain she had caused me had a price tag. You still do not get it, I said quietly. Get what? She demanded. I do not want the money, I said. I do not want a settlement. I do not want to split the proceeds of your crimes. I stepped closer to her. I want the truth, I said. I want it on the public record. I want every shareholder to know what you did. I want every person who reads that blog post to know who the real thief is. I want to strip you of everything you built on my back. You will destroy the family name, Denise cried. The name is already destroyed, I said. I am just scrubbing the rot off the building. I turned to the door. No deal, I said. We are going to a vote. Wait. Denise grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my skin. You ungrateful little... The door to the anteroom burst open. It was Sterling. He looked pale. He was holding his phone, and his hand was shaking. Ms. Hawthorne, he said, looking at me. We have a problem. What is it? I asked, pulling my arm free from Denise. It is the chairman, Sterling said. It is Gideon. My heart stopped. What happened? He collapsed in his office, Sterling said. Paramedics are on the way. It looks like a stroke. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Gideon, the only ally I had, the only person who could authorize the final removal of Denise and Blair. I ran past Sterling, back into the boardroom. The meeting was in chaos. People were on their phones. The external auditors were packing up their files. The meeting is adjourned, one of the loyalists shouted. In light of the chairman's health, we cannot proceed with a vote. No, I shouted. We have a quorum. We must vote. We cannot vote on a restructuring without the chairman present. Another board member argued. The bylaws are clear. Denise walked back into the room. She had heard the news, and the terror on her face had been replaced by something else. Calculation. If Gideon was incapacitated, the power of attorney reverted. Unless he had signed the new directive, unless the paperwork we had prepared yesterday was filed, if it wasn't, Denise was his next of kin. If Gideon died, or if he was declared incompetent before the vote, Denise would inherit control of the trust. She would fire me. She would burn the evidence. She would win. Denise looked at me across the table. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. It seems, she said, her voice dripping with false concern, that my father is indisposed. As his closest living relative, I'm assuming temporary executive authority until his condition stabilizes. You can't do that, I said. He suspended you. Verbally, Denise said. But was it filed? Did he sign the minutes? She looked at Sterling. Sterling hesitated. The minutes were not yet notarized, Sterling admitted. Then I am in charge, Denise declared. She looked at the security guards. Escort Ms. Ravenvale out of the building and seize those audit files. They are company property. This is illegal, I shouted. Sue me, Denise whispered as the guards stepped toward me. I looked at the clock. It was 10:30. Gideon was in an ambulance. The vote was stalled. Denise was seizing control of the room, of the narrative, of the evidence. I had 24 hours, maybe less. If Gideon did not wake up, or if I could not find the one document that superseded her authority, everything I had fought for would be gone. I grabbed my briefcase. I did not wait for the guards to touch me. This isn't over, I said to Denise. It looks over to me, she replied. Sitting down in Gideon's chair, I turned and ran. I had to get to the hospital, but more importantly, I had to find the one thing Gideon had mentioned yesterday, the nuclear option clause. He said he had activated it, but where was the paper if it wasn't in the boardroom? It was in the one place Denise couldn't get to yet. I sprinted to the elevator. The war in the boardroom was lost. the war for the empire had just moved to the streets. The 24 hours that followed were a blur of caffeine, legal briefs, and the cold, hard realization that grief was a luxury I could not afford. Gideon was in the intensive care unit, stabilized but unconscious. Denise and Blair were undoubtedly celebrating his collapse, viewing it as divine intervention in their favor. They thought the old lion was down, so the pride was theirs for the taking. They forgot that the lion had trained a successor. My day began not in the boardroom, but in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hearing room of the district civil court. This was the first front of the war, the hearing regarding the fraudulent loan and the identity theft. Denise arrived with a new lawyer, a slick man in a pinstriped suit who looked like he charged by the syllable. She looked well-rested. She looked confident. When she saw me, she offered a sad, pitying smile, as if I were a confused child acting out. "Cassandra," she whispered as we waited for the judge. "It is not too late. We can go to the hospital together. We can be a family by his bedside. Just drop this nonsense." "Save your breath for the judge," I said. The hearing was short. It was brutal. Denise's lawyer opened with a motion to dismiss, claiming that the signature on the loan collateral was genuine and that Gideon's unfortunate medical state made it impossible to prove otherwise. He argued that I was suffering from financial distress and was inventing a conspiracy to access family funds. "Your Honor," Mr. Vance said, standing up slowly, "we are not relying on Mr. Hawthorne's testimony today. We are relying on science." He called our expert witness to the stand, Dr. Aris, a forensic document examiner with 30 years of experience with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Dr. Aris placed a large display board on the easel. It showed two signatures blown up to the size of a poster. The top one was a standard signature from Gideon Hawthorne on a deed from 5 years ago. The bottom one was the signature on the loan document Denise had used to steal money in my name. "If you look at the pressure points," Dr. Aris explained, pointing to the ink density, "you will see that the bottom signature has what we call hesitation marks. The pen stopped 4 times during the writing of the last name. This indicates the writer was not writing from muscle memory, but was tracing or copying a visual reference." He flipped the chart. "Furthermore," Dr. Aris continued, "we found microscopic indentations on the paper consistent with a guide hand technique, where a second person holds the wrist of the signer, and finally, we recovered a partial thumbprint from the ink while it was still wet. It does not match Gideon Hawthorne. It matches the defendant, Denise Hawthorne." The courtroom went silent. Denise's face turned the color of old ash. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Her lawyer stopped writing. "Based on this evidence," the judge said, looking over his glasses at my mother, "I am granting the temporary injunction. The assets of the Hawthorne Family Trust are frozen pending a criminal inquiry, and I am forwarding this transcript to the district attorney's office." The gavel came down. It sounded like a gunshot. Denise looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. She had thought she could charm her way out. She had thought she could gaslight the legal system the way she had gaslighted me for 10 years. "You put me in jail," she hissed as the bailiff approached her to sign paperwork. "I just turned on the lights, Mother," I said. "You are the one who is ugly in the glare." I did not stay to watch her panic. I had a meeting to attend. I arrived at Hawthorne Holdings at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The air in the building was different now. The rumors had spread. The staff looked at me not as the intruder in the cheap suit, but as the woman who had just drawn first blood in court. I walked into the boardroom. It was fully staffed. The independent directors were there, looking grim. Sterling, the general counsel, was sitting at the right hand of the chairman's seat, and in the chairman's seat sat Denise. She had rushed from the courthouse, reapplied her makeup, and was now trying to project authority. Blair sat next to her, typing furiously on her phone, likely trying to liquidate assets before the freeze order hit the banks. "You are late," Denise said, "and you are trespassing. I am the acting chairwoman." "No," I said. "You are not." "I am the next of kin," Denise shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "My father is incapacitated. That makes me the decision-maker." Actually, Sterling interrupted, his voice dry and professional. That is incorrect. Denise whipped her head around to look at the lawyer she thought was on her side. What did you say? Sterling opened a sealed leather portfolio. He pulled out a document that looked fresh, the ink barely dry. Yesterday, Sterling announced to the room, before his medical episode, Gideon Hawthorne executed a document titled The Successor Designation Letter. It contains a specific activation clause. He looked at me, then back at the board. The clause states that in the event of proven internal fraud committed by a family member, the perpetrator is immediately disqualified from the line of succession. The evidence presented in civil court this morning, the forensic proof of forgery, satisfies the condition of proven internal fraud. This is a coup, Blair screamed. You can't do this. It is not a coup, Sterling said. It is a contingency plan. The letter designates a new voting proxy for the Hawthorne shares, effective immediately. He slid the paper down the long mahogany table. It stopped in front of me. The designated proxy is Cassandra Hawthorne. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Denise stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. He wouldn't, Denise whispered. He wouldn't give it to her. She is nothing. He gave it to the only person who did not steal from him, I said. I walked to the head of the table. I stood next to the chair Denise was occupying. You are in my seat, I said. Denise looked up at me. For a moment, I thought she would refuse. I thought she would make security drag her out. But she looked into my eyes and saw something she had never seen before. She saw the end. She stood up, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. She stepped aside. I sat down. The leather was still warm. I placed my hands on the table. Call the meeting to order, I said to the secretary. The extraordinary meeting of Hawthorne Holdings is now in session, the secretary said, her voice trembling slightly. First order of business, I said, the review of unauthorized financial outflows. I signaled to the external auditors. They projected a spreadsheet onto the massive screen at the end of the room. It was the flow of money I had tracked from North Pine. This lists $500,000 in payments to Verdant Ventures, I said. Blair, would you like to explain why a company registered in your name has been billing us for consulting fees while you were on vacation in Cabo? Blair shrank in her seat. It was legitimate work. I was networking. We have the receipts, I said. We have the flight logs. We have the IP addresses used to transfer the money to Phoenix Horizon. I turned to the board. I am moving to terminate Blair Hawthorne from all executive and consulting positions within Hawthorne Holdings, effective immediately. I said, I am also moving to file a civil suit for the recovery of embezzled funds, and to refer this file to the Securities and Exchange Commission for insider trading and fraud. Seconded, Mr. Henderson said instantly. All in favor? I asked. Every hand in the room went up. Even the loyalists, seeing the ship sinking, raised their hands to save themselves. Motion carried, I said. Blair, please hand over your company badge and phone. Security will escort you out. Blair stood up, tears streaming down her face, real tears this time. Mom, do something. They are firing me. Denise stood there, frozen. She could not save Blair. She could not even save herself. You are a monster, Denise screamed at me. She is your sister. How can you do this? I raised you to be loyal. You raised me to be a spare part, I said. You raised me to be a credit score you could ruin. She is family, Denise wailed, looking at the shareholders, trying one last time to pull on their heartstrings. She is throwing her own family onto the street. She is an ungrateful, cold-hearted child. Look at her. She has no soul. Mr. Henderson stood up. He was a man of few words, but today he had seen enough. Mrs. Hawthorne, Henderson said, his voice cutting through her hysteria. We have seen the credit reports. We have seen the forged signatures. You used your daughter as a human shield for your debt. You stole her identity. You let her live in poverty while you spent her future on handbags. We are not giving this company to a woman who eats her own children. Denise gasped. The judgment of her peers was final. She slumped against the wall, the fight finally draining out of her. I stood up. I walked over to where my mother and sister were huddled, the golden child and the matriarch, now just two trespassers in a room full of professionals. I am not sending you to the street, I said quietly. I am leaving you exactly where you left me 10 years ago, on your own. Cassandra, Denise wept, reaching for my hand. Please, I am your mother. I made a mistake. I chose the wrong path. But I love you. Somewhere inside, you know I love you. I looked at her hand. I remembered how that hand had looked when she pointed to the door in the rain. I remembered how it looked signing the letter that disowned me. You did not make a mistake, Mother, I said. You made a choice. You chose the golden child. You chose the image. You chose the money. I stepped back, out of her reach. Today, I choose myself. I nodded to the security team. Please remove them from the premises. Denise and Blair were led out. There was no dignity in their exit. There was only the sound of Blair sobbing and Denise shouting threats that no one listened to anymore. When the doors closed, the silence in the room was absolute. It was clean. It was the silence of a fever breaking. I looked at the board members. We have a lot of work to do, I said. Let us get started. We worked until midnight. We purged the compromised accounts. We set up new oversight protocols. We drafted the press release that would announce the restructuring. By the time I walked out of the building, my eyes were burning and my body was exhausted, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. I stood on the sidewalk outside the tower. The rain had stopped. The city lights were reflecting on the wet pavement, turning the street into a river of gold. I looked up at the massive sign above the entrance, Hawthorne Holdings. For 10 years, that name had been a weight around my neck. It had been a curse. It had been the reason for my poverty and my pain. But tonight, it was just a name, and for the first time, I owned it. I took my phone out of my pocket. I had one text message. It was from the hospital. He is awake. He is asking for the chairwoman. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in a decade. 10 years ago, they kicked me out of the house with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. They told me I was nothing. They told me I would come crawling back. Today, I did not crawl. I took back an empire. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let me know your city or country. It is amazing to see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Veronica Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get discovered by more people. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next story.